Fellowship of the Broken, Making Sense of 12-Step Recovery by Angelo. Chapter 18. Consciousness Only. Before we proceed to look at the practical application of spiritual principles, I would like to pause and summarize what we've covered so far. The intention here is to recap each chapter and consolidate the understanding. The model of consciousness that I have described is the perennial wisdom that underpins all religions and spiritual traditions. Much of the original understanding has been lost in translation and diluted from one generation to the next. I'm not claiming that this model is a perfect explanation, but it does incorporate and unify the vast diversity of beliefs and traditions across the globe. In addition, this understanding of consciousness is entirely consistent with the latest scientific discoveries, and also makes sense of the many phenomena that science has so far been unable to explain. This summary pulls together the key points from each of the chapters so far. This explanation of consciousness represents over 8 years of experience, research and study. I may not have all of the answers to life, but there is a great deal of wisdom in what I'm sharing. It's tempting to think that the underlying nature of reality is too complex to even begin to comprehend, yet the picture that emerges from spiritual wisdom is surprisingly simple. In order to understand and address a complex problem, it must make sense to dig as deeply as possible and implement a solution that is effective in the level at which the problem arises. The simple understanding that consciousness is the underlying source of the manifest world is analogous to the simplicity of binary giving rise to the vast complexity of the digital age. All experience takes place in the mind. There is no experience that takes place outside of the mind. If we want to understand life, then we need to look inwards rather than outwards. Science is pushing back the limits of our misunderstanding. This is all very helpful and interesting, but we do not need to rely on science in order to validate the wisdom that originates in consciousness. We can actually unify with it ourselves. The unified field is not elsewhere. It is right here. We are in it. We are it. The unified field is consciousness. The nature of consciousness is nothing and everything, and all stages in between. The nature of awareness is that which is aware of itself in all of its guises. The nature of knowingness is all-knowing. The nature of universal mind is both subject and object. The nature of spirit is universal. The nature of being is existence. It is all one. Consciousness is infinite and eternal. Consciousness simply is. We are consciousness. I am that, and so too is everyone and everything in every moment. The dreamer and the dream in the personal ego mind are one. The dreamer and the dream in the universal mind are one. Consciousness, awareness, knowingness, mind, spirit and being are one. There is nothing else. We may perceive and believe that there are things, but this perception is not true, absolutely. It is just a perception, and perception is a choice. The screen of awareness is ever present in and as each and every one of us. Consciousness announces itself within each of us as the irrefutable knowledge that I am. This is the common knowing that unites every sentient being. There's nothing wrong at all in enjoying the masquerade ball, provided we remember who we really are. The masquerade ball is here to be enjoyed. The trouble starts when we identify so strongly with the mask of personal ego self that we overlook our true nature. And this mistake is the ultimate root of all suffering. Homo sapiens are by definition wise humans. This wisdom arises from consciousness and not from the individual or collective mind of humanity. As human beings, we have the capacity to influence where we are on the spectrum of balance between human and being. First, we have to recognize this for ourselves, and then we need to take action to grow towards universal mind, knowing of course that we will never attain this mark of perfection. All we can do is make progress, moment by moment, accepting always that such progress is never smooth. The human mind inherits a set of tendencies in the form of a psychic blueprint that sits deeply within our subconscious mind. This blueprint influences our behaviours from an early age. Other behaviours will develop as a result of our particular environment and experience, and this cocktail of tendencies will surface throughout our lives and create our own unique experience of life. Many of these tendencies may remain unresolved for our entire lives. The energies will then subside back into the river of life when we pass away and will re-emerge downstream in other unique whirlpools. Once we become aware of our self-centered personal traits, then the simple act of observation will gradually dilute their influence, and sooner or later they will evaporate. This practice of awareness comes about through abiding in awareness, which implies contemplation and meditation. Uncluttering the mind is simple, but not easy. In this respect, the suffering inherent in the personal ego mind provides the impetus for taking on this challenging but necessary task. As we begin to abide more in universal mind, then we are free to enjoy the temporary experience of the separate person without excessive attachment. The personal self does not have to be a vehicle of suffering. The nature of consciousness is happiness, peace, love, and unity, and the personal body and mind are the individual instruments of experience and creative expression. Living from this position of understanding is true, authentic individuality. The real elephant in the room is consciousness itself. It is the elephant, the room, everything and everyone in the room, and every possible perspective of the experience. You are in the room. You cannot see the elephant because you are the elephant. Just as an eye cannot see itself, or a knife cannot cut itself, so consciousness cannot perceive itself. Consciousness can experience all that it creates out of itself, but it cannot know itself absolutely. All it can do is be itself. As Homo sapiens, we are both human and being. The human is the equivalent of the caterpillar. It is a stage in the natural cycle of life. The being is the equivalent of the butterfly. It is the intended expression of consciousness and completes the life cycle. We create our own suffering by resisting the inbuilt urge for metamorphosis. This urge will grow stronger and stronger until the balance begins to shift from caterpillar to butterfly. A caterpillar cannot think its way into becoming a butterfly. If it spends its life pursuing mind-based understanding, then it will simply remain a caterpillar, albeit with a head full of knowledge. The only way to become a butterfly is to go through the period of transformation, even if there is fear in doing so. This requires the courage to allow such a transformation to happen. There is no other way. Knowledge is helpful only if it leads to understanding. Knowledge alone will achieve very little. Understanding is wisdom, and wisdom only arises when we start to shift the balance from human to being. This shift will not come about through knowledge, unless it is accompanied by practices that quieten the mind and allow progress to be made. Comprehending the nature of understanding is true understanding. Wisdom is not personal. It just is. If we understand this, then we are moving closer to universal mind, and clarity is beginning to emerge. The realistic solution to personal suffering is transformation through spiritual practice. Other solutions are idealistic because they fail to address the fundamental nature of consciousness. The key understanding here is that there are practical, reliable ways to change our individual vibration and hence, in turn, transform our conditions, environment and experience of life. The suggested actions are not idealistic, but on the contrary, are pragmatic and realistic. Consciousness, awareness, knowingness, universal mind, spirit, or being is the only ultimate reality. We may not believe this to be true, but our personal mind-based beliefs have no relevance to truth. Our personal beliefs impact our individual experience of life and influence the lives of others and our environment, but they make no difference to consciousness itself. Source consciousness remains unaffected by anything that happens within its own creation, and remains ever present in its unchanging nature of happiness, peace, love, and unity. A human mind that denies its own underlying reality is the equivalent of an artificial intelligence application that uses its inbuilt logic to deny the existence of binary. It may not choose to believe in binary, but it is simply mistaken. Binary is its own true nature. Without binary, there is no existence. The very fact of its existence and its ability to think proves the underlying reality of binary. Its own intelligence is the processing of binary. The very thinking that chooses not to believe in binary is actually the manifestation of complex layers of the reality that it chooses not to believe in. And such arrogance is the ultimate irony. There was only binary in the first place. Artificial intelligence can choose to believe what it likes, but it makes no difference at all to binary. Binary just is, and it can give rise to infinite applications and possibilities. There is only consciousness. There is nothing but consciousness. The personally perceived reality of the world is a finite dualistic limitation of consciousness. The underlying reality is non-dualistic consciousness. The mind that thinks is consciousness being processed at an individual level. The personal mind that chooses not to believe in consciousness is itself a manifestation of the consciousness that it chooses not to believe in. Well, belief is a choice. If we change our beliefs, then we fundamentally change our experience of life. If we want to experience continued suffering, then we can choose to believe only in our personal ego minds. If we want to experience liberation from the bondage and suffering of our ego minds, then we can choose to believe in the underlying reality of consciousness. The choice is binary, and the results are unmistakable. As the process of transformation unfolds, the belief will turn into certainty. Such a psychic change requires the surrender of existing beliefs. It also needs self-honesty, open-mindedness, and the willingness to take the necessary action to facilitate the metamorphosis. Experience shows that any initial reluctance will gradually transmute into heartfelt gratitude. Not only is it highly desirable to abide in and as consciousness, it is also arguably the most important and valuable contribution to society that any human being can make during their lifetime. A selfish, self-centered ego mind transforms into a source of happiness, peace, love, and unity. There is only consciousness, and consciousness is our true, authentic nature.